Go ahead and get started. There we go. We got the recording going. And so welcome everybody to the Executive Committee meeting for November 14th. And let's start with the call to order.
Yes, thank you. I'll start with you, Chair Tyson.
Here.
Vice Chair Fliger.
Here.
Director Gibbons.
Here.
Director Martinez-Beltran.
Here.
Thank you. I'll note that currently Director Elahi is absent, but we do have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. All right, let me ask if we have any public comment on items not listed on the agenda. And I see we have some public, but I do not see any hands raised. And so I will say there doesn't appear to be any public comment. So we'll move on to our consent calendar, which consists of one item, and that is to approve the minute of the Executive Committee from August. And do we have any, I'll take a motion first on approval of that.
I move approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
Yvonne. Second, Yvonne. Very good. Any discussion? I do not see any discussion. Any discussion by the public? I do not see any discussion by the public, so let's do a roll call vote.
Yes, thank you. Chair Tyson.
Yes.
Vice Chair Fliger.
Yes.
Director Gibbons.
Aye.
Director Martinez-Beltran.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries with Director Elahi absent.
Very good. We'll just move straight on to the regular calendar with the CEO update.
Hi, Chair Gibbons, members of the Exec Committee. Can you hear me? Good. So two items I'd like to mention. One is resource adequacy compliance for the year 2023. All of California has been short resource adequacy capacity. We have a deadline of October 31, which passed, for us to have purchased sufficient capacity for the next year. We have been unable to do that. The CPUC has, I call it, kind of provided a soft extension through the end of the calendar year before they'll start calculating deficiencies for resource adequacy. So we continue to work on closing the compliance gap. We will bring it to the board's attention more in the first quarter timeframe, when the CPUC will actually have the final numbers, we'll have the final numbers. So this is more of a heads up, that more for awareness at this point than anything else. And the point being, there will be penalties assessed most likely. And so that's kind of what we are working on to reduce the potential penalties.
So Girish, just to clarify, is it fair to say that the price of purchasing the resource adequacy is much greater than the potential penalty, and therefore we choose not to buy it?
No, that's not the case. We're not doing this as a matter of convenience. We actually paid for some of the deals this year. We paid close to 50% more than what we paid last year. And if you compare it to 2018, some of the deals today are about 400 to 500% more than in 2018. So there's an absolute short position, and the RA market is basically broken. And the PUC recognizes it, and we are trying to fix this ship as we are moving this, right? Because we have to keep the lights on. So in the long term, the resource adequacy framework is being changed, and that'll start in the year 2024-25. That's going to go to a slice model. But in the interim, this is what we have. And we are in touch with the CPUC. We have been in touch with them over the last year. COVID and supply chain difficulties have impacted everyone in the state. In a way, when you think about the biggest legislation that got passed this year, AB 846, which was the extension of Diablo Canyon, it's all around reliability. And so this is not a one-year issue, it's a longer term, it's more like a midterm issue, 5 to 10 years of getting, as we transition to a clean grid, as we look at ways in which we can retire gas plants over the next 15 to 20 years, And as we get solar storage wind coming in, this is the rocky road we are in. So anyway, long answer to your question, but it's not from convenience in terms of the penalty.
It looks like we have a hand raised from Director Martinez Beltran.
Thank you. Girish, I just want to know, so since this seems like it's kind of an industry-wide issue and a long-term issue, are they considering additional extensions, waiving of fees? Has there been any discussion on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, there has been discussion on that. Through the regulatory side, we had, through Cal CCA, we've actually filed a petition for modification on one aspect of this resource adequacy story. That was denied, in fact, just a few days ago. But the PUC did talk about additional changes that need to be made to reduce the uncertainty that all of us face. As far as a waiver, we did ask for a full waiver of penalties. That has not been approved, but they have given us some flexibility in terms of the deadline. Last year, the deadline was essentially October 31. Here, they've extended the deadline to the end of December. I think that, combined with more transparency from the CAISO, the California Independent System Operator, and the central procurement entity, that's PG&E, will give us a little bit more flexibility. But again, this is some of this flexibility will only show up next year, Yvonne. The one that we have this year is at least an extension of these deficiency calculations through the end of the year. Whereas
Okay.
last year, they would have started their calcs and we would have got some kind of notice in the November, December period. Now we'll have a couple months to try and rectify it. And so we'll continue to go out to the market. We have put out multiple RFOs for this capacity. And we're looking at this not just in terms of what do we do for next year, but look at it for the next 5 to 10 years. And because we will have to most likely contract for existing fossil fuel resources for some of our needs.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Right. The second item I'd like to bring up, again for awareness at this point, is what's known as the NEM 3.0 proposed decision. You probably saw something in the newspapers in the last few days around that. So NEM 3.0 Take 1 was done last December. And we had a lot of feedback, and that's understating it by orders of magnitude in terms of feedback that the PUC and the governor received, that it was not workable. The essential point here is there is a subsidy that everyone agrees exists with the current NEM. There's argument about the size of the subsidy, but everyone agrees there is a subsidy. And the PUC and stakeholders have been trying to change that, reduce the subsidy or eliminate the subsidy. They tried it last December. Take 1 didn't work well, so they've tabled it. And now, just a couple of days ago, they've come out with Take 2. NEM 3.0 Take 2 actually aligns with our position. We had taken a position last time that this decision was directionally correct, which was let's reduce the subsidy. Let's create something that encourages storage. In addition to just solar, we want to encourage solar plus storage. That is in the proposed decision. Another thing we asked for is we said we did not think that the grid connection charge, which was about $45 a month for every solar customer, we thought that was too high. In this Take 2, they've eliminated that grid connection charge. This was also known as the solar tax. So that solar tax has been eliminated. The third point is the previous take one essentially created a 14-year payback for new solar. Take two is a 9-year payback for solar. So in many of the areas that we have asked for changes, those have been provided. We're a very tiny piece of this giant policy and economic issue. There's going to be an oral hearing at the PUC this week on Wednesday, and it is scheduled for decision in mid-December. I think it's December 14th or 15th. So I just want to keep you up to date. We will communicate with you on this as we go forward, because no doubt you will be hearing from a variety of stakeholders locally. I'll leave with this. It seems to me, at least at this point, the volume of complaints from the solar industry and the investor-owned utilities, the volume seems to be the same. They both dislike it equally on both sides for different reasons. So whereas the previous decision, I felt like the solar contracting industry disliked it a lot more than the IOUs. So maybe we are close to a equal dislike compromise.
Great. How about, let's hear from Director Gibbons.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Was a very helpful update. I'm a little confused when they take away the $45 grid connection. What's that being offset by?
So they are looking at a buyback rate that is much lower than the current rate. And let me get back to you with more detail on that. We really are absorbing it. So that's my short answer.
Sure. So I did read something about that in the paper, and I also read that the maximum anyone can put on their property or whatever project is 150%. So I know that it would be helpful at some point to understand all the variables that are going to contribute to the incentive to make it more balanced.
Yeah, so part of this, if I may say so, when we think about influence, we are the ant and the end of the elephant's tail on this one. So we don't have much influence on this issue. It's most of the credit and the subsidy is on the transmission and distribution rate. We look at it obviously from our mission standpoint as to what kind of rate structure would promote our mission. And also we know that California has one of the highest rates in the country. So the higher that electric rates go, it becomes a dampener for our electrification efforts. I'll just leave you with that 150% oversizing is actually for electrification. So they'll allow for 50% more on the solar capacity on your roof in anticipation of customers putting in heat pump water heaters and electric vehicle chargers in your home. And so you can get that charge using clean electricity.
Vice Chair Flagger, please.
Thank you, Chair Tyson. Girish, I wanted to pick up on what you just said about you're still looking at it, and that makes sense. I know it recently came out just a few days ago, but what's the timeline on the effective date for NEM 3.0? And I'm asking only because last spring, everything got stopped, right? Yeah. And so what's the timeline if this goes through? Is this a comment period that we're in right now? So it's not final yet.
I'll get back to you. It is not final now. It is a proposed decision. The decision, I believe, is being agendized for final decision on December 14th or 15th. So there's an oral hearing 2 days from now, scheduled for December 14th or 15th. There's a 120-day clock that starts after a decision is adopted before the decision becomes effective. So if it's adopted on December 15th. It'll be April 15th or tax day 2023 before NEM 3.0 goes into effect. So someone puts in a solar system on April 14th, 2023, and they don't even have to put a solar system in. They just have to put in a completed application. They will be folded into NEM 2.0. And NEM 2.0 in the previous decision had a 15-year limit. Now it's become a 20-year limit. So for the most part, anyone who's in NEM 2.0 now or gets in before this decision becomes implemented will have many years of positive benefit for them, because the current system, the payback in PG&E's territory, the payback period is between 4 to 7 years. So when you have a 20-year payback, you're going to have 12 to 15 years of basically gravy that you're going to be making.
So that's helpful on two fronts, Girish. So one, just understanding the effective date. And so for residents to understand that as well. But the last time, if I remember, a decision was made in December, but then it got stopped during that 120-day period. So it's not final until it's final during that 120 days. Is that correct?
No, according to this, the clock starts ticking from when the PUC adopts the decision. So this is just a proposed decision. The PUC hasn't voted on it yet. And so the earliest they would vote on it would be December 15th, and that starts the 120-day clock. But they've written the decision to say the 120-day clock starts at any time the PUC adopts the decision. So the PUC could basically table this agenda item on December 15th to January. They could send staff back to tweak it. They could have an alternate decision written by one of the commissioners. So it's not done yet, but just given it is post-election right now, and my sense of it is there'll be a push to get it done very quickly.
Okay, but what I'm hearing is if they do move forward at the December 14th date and it gets adopted, then it's essentially a done deal. It just takes that 100. Okay, thank you.
Correct. And I'm going to just add one more. I should have added this right when I started, and is one of the differences today in terms of the economics of solar versus back last December is President Biden's Inflation Reduction Act. When last year, the investment tax credit for solar had, I think, a 4-year window where it was basically going to go to zero, from 30 to 26% ITC, 22, and then it was zero. President Biden's IRA has changed that, and for the next 10 years, the investment tax credit stays at 30%. So those economics are actually better. And I'm sure all stakeholders will be taking a look at this.
Great, thank you. I had one question when, Girish, when you mentioned NEM 3.0 and the strategy was to encourage storage, are they making a distinction of storage behind the meter versus in front of the meter?
Oh yeah, this is behind the meter.
Okay.
So this is behind the meter solar. And one of the things that's actually a precursor to an item that's coming in front of you today is in this decision, they say that anyone who takes NEM 3.0, takes service on NEM 3.0, will also be moved to an electrification rate, which has a bigger delta between on-peak and off-peak prices than today's time of use rates. So when you have a larger delta between on and off peak, it's a greater incentive to add storage.
And it's so tiny. You know, this whole thing about 4 p.m. and 9 p.m., I'm paying attention to it, but it's literally 2 or 3 cents a kilowatt hour. It's hardly anything right now. at least on my bill.
I think maybe Dawn may be able to shed light on it in later on, well, even now.
Yeah, the standard ETOUC residential rate, like you say, Director Tyson, has a very small winter differential. It's only 2 cents. And in the summer, I think it's 6, which still isn't a whole lot. But this electrification rate that you'll hear more about later has a much wider difference between peak and off peak.
Okay, makes sense. I don't see any other hands raised. I do not, turning to the public, I think the public is all pretty much staffed, but I don't see any hands raised over there either. So does that complete your CEO report?
Yes, Chair. Thank you.
All right, well, in that case, let's move right on to item number 3, which is the hybrid meeting requirements.
And if I may just comment, Director Elahi joined the meeting.
Yes, he joined. Yeah, he's been here, what, 20 minutes or so.
Thank you, Chair and members of the Executive Committee. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Great. Excellent. So thank you for having us back. We presented earlier this year to the board on changes that were upcoming and potential with regards to hybrid meeting requirements, but we're here to tell you what we now know, given the changes that have happened. Next slide, please. As I'm sure you're all familiar with, in October, the governor announced the end of the COVID state of emergency with plenty of runway. So it will end effectively on February 28th of 2023, and on March 1st, we'll resume business as usual with some tweaks, I guess you could call it. At the same time, AB 2449 was finalized and is available for local governments to utilize for Brown Acted meetings beginning on January 1st. On that March 1st date, absent any other choice that the board elects to make, we will revert to traditional Brown Act rules, and I'll speak a bit about those in a second. But first, I'd like to talk about the variable here, which is AB 2449. Next slide, please. So AB 2449, which is the new set of rules, as a refresher, allows for the continuation of relaxed noticing requirements. So this again means you don't have to provide an advance notice of where you're going to be meeting from. You can continue to meet from your home. But in sort of classic legislative fashion, there were a lot of guardrails put on this in order to make sure that it's not used or overused. The most notable of those is that a quorum of board members must be in person at one location within the service territory. So that doesn't mean at locations clearly, but one. So there has to be a central meeting space with a quorum of the board in person. If that quorum requirement's met, then there are opportunities for other board members, not in person, to attend via the relaxed requirements, but with some, again, particular guardrails there, including the requirement for either a just cause or emergency circumstance sort of rationale, along with some disclosure requirements about who else might be in attendance at that location. And in addition, a particular limit, whether that be, or, sort of evidenced in 2 ways, of 3 consecutive meetings or more than 20% of the regular calendared meetings for the year. So with all of these in mind, it's fairly complex administratively, both for elected officials, board members such as yourselves, and us as staff, to try and track all of these things. Next slide, please. Absent the application of AB 2449 rules, as I mentioned, we would revert to traditional Brown Act noticing requirements. And just to refresh, those are that, any remote locations, any teleconference locations in, previous Brown Act parlance must be notified in advance, and those must be open and accessible to the public. Often you hear about the taping a notice up on your door to make it known that this is a public meeting location and the public may attend from the location that's being utilized. So, with that in mind, you could attend from, any publicly accessible location. And we're proposing that, as I think we stated beforehand, Cupertino Community Hall continue as our board of director meeting location. We propose using the SVCE offices with their built out conference rooms with Zoom capabilities as the committee meeting locations, or any other member agency facility that would be publicly accessible. That does not, of course, stop you from, noticing and using another location, whether that be a hotel if you're on the road traveling, or your home if you're comfortable noticing it. But they are, required to be both noticed and made publicly accessible. Next slide, please. So with all of those in mind, our recommendation is pretty straightforward, and that is, to continue to kind of follow traditional Brown Act requirements, which again will go into place without any specific action on our part. Utilizing Cupertino Community Hall as the primary meeting location for board meetings. The SVCE office is the primary location for committee meetings. And with advance notice, working with board members to set up any alternative locations for remote access. Our anticipation being, city halls, libraries, community centers, and some of the further portions of our service territory where members could attend, but not necessarily need to make the trek all the way to Cupertino Hall. With that in mind, that would mean that board members could attend, in a quorum within the service territory, rather than in location in one place, presumably in Cupertino. And it doesn't mean that AB 2449 is therefore left completely off the table. It could still be utilized in emergency situations, should the need arise. And part of what we'd want to determine, along with, sort of the advance notice for setting up alternative locations, would be what situations and what protocols we would want to follow if that AB 2449 set of requirements, or set of noticing rules were to be utilized. So this is a discussion item, and we're really, here to get your feedback before we approach the full board. We know that we're in a period with transition within the board, and want to have a discussion with new members as they onboard as well. But absolutely wanted to get the ball rolling here with yourselves. So with that, I open it up to any questions and discussion.
All right, let's start off with Director Gibbons.
Thank you. Clarification, Kevin.
Yes.
You said that, I think you said that we don't, to make the quorum in the service territory, it does not have to be everyone of the quorum in the same location. It can be multiple locations.
Under traditional Brown Act noticing requirements, it's our understanding in conversation with Trisha Ortiz, General Counsel, that suffices for traditional Brown Act noticing, and that there's not a single physical location that's required. Benna, I believe you're on. Does that match your recollection as well?
Correct, but if we wanted to use AB 2449 rules, we would have to have one single physical location, have quorum within our service territory.
Thank you. That's actually, I wasn't clear on my question. That's exactly what I was asking.
Okay.
49, it does have to be the majority in one physical location. Got it. Thank you so much.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you for the clarification.
Vice Chair Flagler.
Thank you. And Liz, Director Gibbons asked one of my 3 questions because that wasn't clear to me as well. And Kevin, that's interesting that you're saying under traditional Brown Act requirements that we weren't required before to have the quorum present in a single physical location. I guess in practice, that's what has always happened. And I thought that was the legal requirement, but that's interesting. But under AB 2449, it does require the quorum to be in the same single physical location, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And then what about the public, members of the public, if we were to invoke AB 2449? Are they allowed to appear remotely?
Yes, AB 2449's requirements apply only to members of the legislative body. And there is still flexibility around attendance of both staff and the public from any remote technology. So we'd want to continue to enable public participation and to some degree staff participation as part of that where necessary and where it would increase, and enable engagement. So.
And are we required as a Brown Act body to adopt a resolution, take an action in order to invoke AB 2449? And the reason I'm asking is, let's say the future board votes to move forward under traditional Brown Act meeting requirements. But then you start having members who want to appear remotely and they fit within those limited criteria. Would they be able to do it if the board had not adopted a resolution? Like, is there flexibility? Oh, we now want to do AB 2449.
My understanding is no, there is not a single enabling resolution that's required up front. Benna, can you confirm that?
That is my understanding as well, but AB 2449 has disclosure requirements during the meeting as well. So you as a board member would have to say, I am invoking AB 2449 for these reasons. And it has to be those just cause or emergency reasons. So there is some disclosure to the public when you are invoking that authority.
So basically, if I understand correctly, if I, as a member of a Brown Act body, want to participate remotely under the traditional Brown Act, where in the past, if you're at a hotel in Germany, you call in and you have to put the notice on your hotel door and go through that dance, that still applies. Or if I do AB 2449, then it's the same thing. I just have to now make this disclosure. Like, what's the difference between a council member appearing remotely under the traditional rules versus 2449?
So I would frame it as traditional Brown Act rules require, they're different kinds of disclosures. So traditional Brown Act would require you to disclose the location where you will be attending from in advance. And that would need to be publicly accessible. AB 2449 requires you to disclose the reason why you will be attending remotely, but not the location. And then the methods and the timing are obviously different. So 2449, you would need to notice that, along with, again, any attendees who are present who are over the age of 18 at the time of the meeting, all assuming that the quorum of the legislative body is meeting in one physical location.
Just add that under traditional Brown Act rules, you would have to make that teleconference location accessible to the public, but under 2449, it would not have to be.
Okay, thank you.
Director Elahi?
Thank you. I guess this is probably going to get clearer as you go along. From Montesino's perspective, we do have a community hall which might be easier access to people from Gilroy and Morgan Hill and Los Gatos and maybe even Saratoga. So we'd like to offer that as a potential spot for meetings also. I don't know how the rest of you feel about that, but it's available. We have OWL and everything else, so that will be available. And just one clarification on the 2449. I know under traditional Brown Act rules, you have to put in the agenda where the non-appearing member is going to show up and the location where they're going to show up. Under 2449, do you still have to do that, or the member can just call in at the last minute and say, here I am?
It's the latter. You could call in at the last minute. You would have to, however, be both on audio and video. So
Right.
that stipulation was made as part of 2449, but you do not have to advance notice that location at all.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yes.
Director Martinez Beltran?
Thank you. I'm trying to figure out, I think I've got most of it, but I want to make sure. So is there any other difference between the traditional Brown Act and 2449 besides traditional Brown Act? You disclose where you're attending in advance. I think it's 72 hours. I've done it before. It's very cumbersome. And then the 2449, you just would have to disclose the reason, and anyone over 18. You do audio and video, so what I'm doing now would not qualify. And is there anything else that I'm missing from that? Is there anything that isn't the difference between the two?
Well, the only noticeable difference, and then forgive me if you mentioned this, but it is that quorum in a single physical location. That's sort of the pre-existing condition for allowing the relaxed flexibility, is that the quorum of the legislative body will meet in that one single location, enabling the use of that 2449 flexibility for emergency or just cause, and without the noticing requirements of the traditional Brown Act.
Right.
So it's a little bit of a, I see it as a little bit of a chicken and the egg. So you kind of need to know that you're going to have that quorum to
Mhm.
almost be able to say, I have an emergency, which is awkward. And
Right.
that's where we get caught up in the sort of administrative tricks of this. And I think that, there is definitely some value to utilizing 2449 if there is an emergency. We would just want to, as a body, kind of decide what those rules of protocol would be. At what point would we want to establish, yes, there's a quorum in a single physical location. Thus, if you were to have an emergency, you could invoke 2449 and then, attend remotely without the noticing requirements.
Right. And we would not, even if I guess I'm also interested to know, are we able to flex between the two? And what are the limitations of that?
You
don't.
could.
Oh, go ahead, Mena.
You, as a board member, could choose for this particular meeting, I'm going to use Traditional Brown Act rules, and for the next one, I'm going to use AB 2449. We actually have a comparison chart that was part of your packet in the attachment, and then Kevin also has a slide that really compares the Traditional Brown Act authorities and AB 2449. A really important piece of AB 2449 is that it's very restrictive on the number of times you can use it. You can only use it a handful of times, and it can't be consecutively more than 3. So, with Traditional Brown Act, it's actually unlimited in terms of how many times you want to use it during a given year. So in many ways, Traditional Brown Act authorities are more flexible than what the legislature actually passed in AB 2449.
Okay, and so then this, talking about the various locations, would be under the Traditional Brown Act?
That's correct. We anticipate that if it did become or is already in essence difficult to attend that single location, the sort of primary meeting spot at Cupertino, that we would work with.
Put that back. Sorry, that slide.
That we would work with our member agencies, and Director Elahi graciously offered Monte Sereno, but we anywhere there are board members that would like to attend from, we'll work to make sure that we can enable that. And then you would of course notice that location. It would be accessible to the public, but there would not be a limit on it, on the limit on the number of times you could utilize that location to attend remotely.
And would we not be able to use 2449, for example, a South County location that is going to happen every meeting time with 2449, and maybe on the third one, since you can only do it 3 times or whatever, that we then go to the mothership?
Well, I if I'm hearing you correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, if you were to decide that you would like to attend regularly from, to use Morgan Hill City Hall as a remote location, we would notice that regularly as part of just the traditional packet and agenda process, and it would be available for the whole series of meetings. It would only be then if you, oh, go ahead.
If we were to do that with 2449, because again, this chicken and egg that you were talking about, that would set it up so that my colleagues, anybody else could be set up to use or invoke 2449 should they need to.
Well, if I'm understanding correctly, there is a scenario where if a number of board members were each meeting at a number of remote locations, you couldn't achieve that quorum in one place. But so long as there were a quorum, again, it's Cupertino Community Hall for argument purposes, then a number, and that number is somewhat dependent upon achieving that quorum, could attend from multiple remote locations within the service territory under Traditional Brown Act rules.
Right. And that's what I think I'm trying to solve. There's only 2 of us in South County, so.
Yeah. So to use that example, that yourselves and representatives from Gilroy could, co-meet or even meet individually with a quorum of the board in Cupertino without any problem.
Okay, I'm going to interject myself before we come to Director Gibbons, all right? So just to clarify, what I understand is 2449 is available to us, and that the staff is recommending that we stick with the traditional Brown Act meetings as a matter of course. And when I saw that it was administrative burden, at first I thought it was because now somebody has to keep track of the more than 2 meetings in a row or 30%. But I think your big administrative reason is you got to figure out, do we have an in-person quorum at that site? And I'm picturing that is more of the reason. The other thing that's a restriction with 2449 is that you have to be on voice and video, and I'm at the same time, and I'm wondering if we've had many meetings via Zoom where somebody has to turn off their video because it's of a weak connection. Would that person then be in effect kicked out of the meeting while that video was off, or do we know how that would work?
I think that's a bridge we've yet to cross. And hopefully, it wouldn't constitute, the necessity of removal from the meeting. I would think that intermittency wouldn't by itself be an issue, but I think it does remain to be seen.
Okay, that makes sense. The issue about the 20%, which is a very low number, by the way, the 3 in a row actually already kicks you out for the year. And I assume that would be for each particular type of meeting. So for example, executive committee separate from board meeting. I'm seeing a head nod from Benna. And so my last question then is, I think it's easier for us to picture how we would do our monthly board meetings, but then our committee meetings then. So for example, this one that we're holding right now, we would be, by going with the Brown Act reversion, then we would publicly notice any location that somebody is not at the main center, which I assume for a committee meeting would be at SVCE offices.
Yes.
So, as opposed to the Cupertino City Hall. So I think I've got a picture on it. And with that, did we lose your hand, Director Gibbons?
No, I'm still here.
Okay.
So let me say back where I am based on this conversation. With the staff's clarification that the current Brown Act allows board members or committee members to attend from anywhere within the service territory with 72 hours notice, which could be published on a regular basis. That in fact is more flexible than the significant constraints of 2449. 2449 has an awful lot of constraints,
Yes.
right? Because
Yes.
so that's my takeaway, that actually for South County members in particular, you're better off under the current Brown Act.
I'm seeing general agreement there. Director Martinez Beltran, is your hand still up? I'm going to go on to Director Elahi, and then you can lower your hand unless it's still up.
Yeah, I think Director Gibbons summed it up well. The only reason you want to use 2449 is if you really didn't know you were not going to be able to show up. If you know you're going to be able to show up and you want to, or the other reason is if you want to hide your location, then you want to use 2449. But if you know it's too hard to get up to Cupertino, come to Montecino. We'll publish a notice there as the place where directors are going to be zooming in from, and we'll have all the Zoom equipment there. So that might be the way to do it. Just show up there rather than have to drive up if that's an issue. Otherwise, just use your regular Brown Act.
Good thought. Martinez Beltran, Director.
Thank you, Chair. So are we thinking that this will start then in February? When would this be invoked? And then also one cleanup question on the Brown Act, is that also, I mean, I've done that internationally, so I imagine that's anywhere, right? Because Director Gibbons mentioned in the service territory, but I know I've done it from abroad. I just want to make sure that stands.
So we anticipate in March, after the end of the state of emergency, when AB 361, the current requirements were operating under, when those cease, we'll return towards one of these two kind of meeting paradigms, with our recommendation being traditional Brown Act noticing requirements and remote attendance, which, to your point about international attendance, does not preclude international attendance with that advanced noticing and, you know, the theoretical possibility of public participation from that location.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Great. I don't see any more hands raised. Do we have any public hand raised? I don't see any. So I think this item was for discussion. I think we eventually figured it out. Thanks for showing that chart. With that, I think we're ready to move on to item 4, which is the board elections and describing the process that will follow.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Executive Committee members. So this is a bit of a refresher for some of you on how we do our appointment process for our chair, vice chair, and committees. So unfortunately, Director Gibbons won't be with us next year, which makes us a little bit sad. But for everyone else, this is just going to be an update for you. So as you're familiar, January is our annual meeting in which we'll make appointments for our chair, vice chair, and this body, the executive committee. So following our December board meeting, we'll be providing an info update similar to this to remind everybody of these upcoming appointments. And I will request letters of interest for the positions of chair and vice chair, and also notification of any member interested in joining this body, the executive committee. As a reminder, this is a 5-member group. I'll likely reach out to you all to see if you would be interested in serving again for 2023 before I present in December. That way we know about how many vacancies we have. And then those selections will be made at our January board meeting. For our remaining committees, that would be our Finance and Admin Committee and Audit Committee, and any additional ad hoc committees that are created between now and then. We'll be using a process similar to last year's, I say past process there, and I'll elaborate on that a little bit more. But we'll pretty much distribute the information on who currently is serving in these roles and how many people can be in them and what limitations we have in terms of membership for that. And then we'll make those selections at our February board meeting. So a little bit of a snapshot here. I just threw a lot of dates at you. So on the 14th, there'll be an info item at our December board meeting. The day after, immediately, I'm just going to ask for letters of interest for chair and vice chair, and ask executive committee members to let me know if they'd be interested in either re-joining this group and any new members who would be interested in this group. I'll ask that those be submitted after the holiday on January 3rd, and then we'll make those selections in January at our board meeting. And similarly, following that, then we'll send out the committee information for those who are interested to let me know, and then we'll make those decisions in February at our February 8th board meeting. So as I mentioned, past process, we have this committee matrix worksheet that we had distributed, and we have decided to maybe do away with this year. It's a little confusing. We want to make it pretty clear and easy for people to let us know that they're interested. So I'll likely just distribute something that's similar. It's going to have all the same information on it, a description of the meeting, membership, times, current roster, etc. But it'll be kind of just a little recap, and then I'll just ask folks to let me know if they're interested in joining rather than filling out a more formal form. So that would be the only change that we're making this year to our appointment process. So that concludes the presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions in terms of timing or process, membership.
Great, thank you for that presentation, Andrea. Let me start off. Are all our subcommittees Brown Act committees?
Almost all of them. We do have a risk oversight committee, which is not.
That's the one I was going to ask about. Okay, all right. Good to know. Any questions from anybody else? I don't see any. Oh, there's Vice Chair Fleiger.
Thank you, Chair Tyson. So my question has to do with the process, and I do have some background noise. I apologize. So I know in Los Altos, we do our regional board and committee appointments on December 13th. So is the period for applications open until December 14th?
Yeah, so December 14th, we'll actually open it up. and I'll send out the information to everybody. If
Okay.
anybody were to join, say in January, I would also send that to them so they have an opportunity to let us know if they're interested in serving as well. So this will be sent out to directors and alternates. It's mainly for the committee, other committees other than this body. This body is typically our directors only and not alternates, but for other alternates, we'll be sending out the committee info so they have an opportunity to let us know if they're interested in serving as well.
Great, thank you.
Okay, very good. I don't see any other questions. Are there any comments or questions from the public? I do not see any. So for that, I think this is for discussion. So thank you. And we'll look forward to those forums and that selection process coming ahead. With that, we'll move on to item number 5, the establishing an electrification discount rate.
All right, thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, directors. I'll be taking us through the first part of this presentation, and then Peter Mustasich and Adam Sullivan will be jumping in from our energy services team. As you all know, November and December each year are typically our rate setting season. So that's when we get the latest rates from PG&E, and we calculate what our overall discount for customers will be in the following year. So we want to begin that discussion here today, and then also introduce the notion of an additional discount associated with electrification and related investment. Next slide, please. We'll begin with a brief review of where we are budget-wise. Next slide. So in September of this year, of course, we approved the budget for 2023, and that budget had in it some assumptions around our discount beginning in January, and that assumption was that we would raise our discount from 1% to 2% for 2023. We also built in the notion of approximately a 10% or an additional 10% discount for Carafera customers, which would raise the overall discount for those customers to nearly 40%. And this is in lieu of taking an additional 1% discount for all customers. So 2% across the board plus this additional Carafera discount. That was assumed in the budget, but we knew that when we got to November or December, we'd have a clearer fix on what, excuse me, PG&E's rates would be. On what PG&E's rates would be, and the PCI and so forth, and we could revisit that that discount projection. Next slide. So some good news based on the latest PG&E gen rate and PCI information, both of which have moved in a favorable direction, at least from the perspective of our rates. If we look at those numbers and balance those against some higher costs that we'll see on the power supply side, we should see an additional 24 million or so available for a contribution to reserves, or available to spend, basically. On the right side here, if we look at that additional money in the context of the stress test methodology that the finance team has used, that number actually grows to around 30 million. So if there are questions on the details, we can go into this later, but the short ride here is that using our stress test methodology, we should be comfortable with an additional 30 million and leaving us in a 120-day cash position under some of the worst elements that the stress test scenario can view. So that's the number we have. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, this is the time of year where we typically go through the rate setting process. Next slide will have some of the details in it. So we're having the first conversation here today, and then at the December 15th meeting, we're going to be setting the overall discount rate, and we're going to be looking at adding the new electric home rate to our rate sheet. This is something that PG&E has put in place as of, or will put in place as of December 1st. We want to get that into our rates just as soon as possible at the current discount, as we think about a broader discounting strategy for next year. And in that strategy for next year, again, we want to think about this maybe differentiated discount for electrification. We then receive PG&E's finalized rates, if everything goes according to plan, by at the end of the year, and then we make our rates effective, building off of those PG&E rates as of around the 15th of January. So we want to have the discount figured out prior to December 30th and this January 15th roll of our rates. There's still a possibility that PG&E won't have their rates finalized by the end of December. This has happened actually the last couple of years where it's gotten bumped out to February or March. But at least based on our latest information, we're still tracking for December this year. Next slide. Okay, some options for this coming year. Next slide. So as you know, in previous years, we have had one discount that's applied effectively to all rates. This year, we have strategic focus areas that focus on really expanding our electrification value proposition and leveraging SVCE's balance sheet to provide financial solutions for customers. So in that context, we wanted to think about, is there a broader way that we could look at discounting? Could we take a hybrid approach? Could we increase our overall discount by some amount, but then use some of that additional funding to offer an even more discounted electrification rate and expand programs around that concept? So that's what we're going to go through here today. We'll talk about what this hybrid approach could look like. So Peter, shall you take it from here?
That sounds good. Thanks, Don. Next slide. Yeah, so I'm gonna go into a little more kind of detail around the suggestions in the hybrid approach. But first, for framing, I just want to say we've had a lot of conversation around REACH codes, and we're kind of in the thick of the REACH code adoption process, and a lot of great work's been happening by city staff and SVCE staff. But this is all centered and focused around new construction. And as we move forward, we're really going to be looking at electrification for the other 98% of buildings that are existing. And what can we do to bring electrification into more existing homes? Next slide, please. Based on our modeling, in an average existing home, electrifying major gas appliances will likely lead to a small, kind of modest increase in monthly energy bills. Our programs like Future Fit Homes and formerly Heat Pump Water Heater have really focused on making the project cost competitive with a gas replacement. So the upfront cost of electrifying appliances, making that cost neutral with a gas replacement. But we also have opportunity through kind of a strategic rate discount to address the bill side of it, to try to make ongoing monthly bills competitive with mixed fuel bills. And we kind of do this in a two-pronged approach. And the first part is raising awareness within our customers of PG&E's new kind of electric friendly rate. And the second is by kind of going further with that rate to extend an even deeper discount to really help push towards bill neutrality or even bill savings. Next slide, please. So to kind of put this in more context, here we kind of look at an average mixed fuel home going through the electrification process. So the bar all the way on the left, in blue, we see the average monthly electric bill cost, and in orange, we see the gas cost component. So if we take that home and electrify it and keep it on the standard TOUC rate, we anticipate a pretty significant increase in monthly bill costs. However, by then having that customer enroll in PG&E's new electric home rate, that's substantially reduced to just a small kind of incremental difference over compared to the mixed fuel monthly cost. But if we take that one step further and apply a 10% discount to SVCE's generation portion of that electric home rate, we can push that to cost neutral or even into bill savings. And I just want to underscore that even though a $6 a month increase doesn't necessarily sound significant, when we talk about working with cities to give them the confidence to adopt existing building policy, the bill impact is going to be really front and center in that conversation. And so having something like a discount to backstop and to give confidence that the bills won't increase and could potentially even decrease is really going to be paramount to moving that existing home electrification efforts forward. Next slide, please. So we've talked a lot in kind of our internal development of this idea about who benefits from an electrification discount, and then which customers are left behind. And so it's really, you know, the customers today that are voluntarily electrifying their existing homes are primarily single-family homeowners in middle to upper income areas. The customers who are left behind, who don't have access to electrification, are the ones who can't afford it and who don't have the control or the authority to electrify. So this is typically low-income renters in multifamily buildings. Next slide, please. So to kind of put some numbers around this, we looked at this more to kind of better understand our multifamily renters throughout our territory, looking at it through the SVCE lens. And as a reminder, that's SVCE was established by the CPUC. It's the Socioeconomic Vulnerability Index. And it's a helpful lens to look at equity because it, in addition to looking at income, it also incorporates things like unemployment rates, education, language barriers, and it puts things like utility bill impacts on a household's overall financial situation into context a little bit more. So we find this really helpful. Not surprisingly, most of our single-family homeowners live in SVCE's 1 and 2, which are the higher income, more educated quartiles. But when we look at multifamily renters, 2/3 of them live in SVCE's 3 and 4, which are on the more disadvantaged end of that scale. Next slide, please. So to address this, the board has already approved a multifamily direct install program, which is really a very effective way to come in and try to help these low-income renters. But the approved program does have limits. So for example, there's $2 million that has already been approved, which could reach kind of approximately 150 to 300 units. So it does have a pretty limited reach. Currently, only renters with gas heating are eligible because of the kind of decarbonization perspective that was baked into that program. But as we did analysis behind an electrification discount, what we came to understand is that about 40% of renters have electric resistance heating, and so they would be ineligible for that DI program. And this is over 30,000 customers in our territory, predominantly renters in low-income areas. Next slide, please. So if we were to include electric heating retrofits into this DI program, not only could we reach a wider customer base amongst these low-income renters, we'd also have a significant impact on heating bills. So we've all seen electric baseboards here on the left. And the issue with these is that they're very expensive, they're inefficient. And so I think we've all heard stories about people only turning on the baseboard in their bedroom during the winter because it costs so much to heat an entire apartment. And tenants are stuck with them. They don't have the authority to come in and rip it out of the wall and put in a different heating system if they wanted to. So if we were to use our direct install program, to come in and swap these out for heat pumps, not only could we save almost 2/3 off of their heating bill, but we also have the benefit that a heat pump can reverse, right? So we could bring air conditioning into a lot of apartments that don't currently have air conditioning. And then in doing this, we would also, these tenants would then qualify for access to PG&E's electric home rate, which they wouldn't qualify with an electric baseboard. Next slide, please. All right, great. So I'm gonna hand it back to Don or to Adam.
Okay, next slide, please. So with this hybrid approach, the trick will be allocating this $30 million surplus that we have across the elements that we've discussed. So across the overall increase in a discount rate, across additional funding for a new electrification discount, and funding for this expanded multifamily direct install program. So I'll warn you that the next slide is it's a table. It's a little bit of an eye chart, but it attempts to lay out some different combinations of how we might fund these three elements. So next slide, please. So explaining how this works, let's look at the first, or I guess it's the second row, called alternative one. Alternative one would maintain our currently planned discount of 2% beginning next year, and then allocate that $30 million surplus across both the electrification discount and the expanded multifamily direct install program. Just even amounts, 15 million each. And then working down the page, alternatives 2, 3, and 4 take our overall discount up. So the overall discount in alternative 2 is 3%. In alternative 3, it's 4%. And you can see how that proceeds. And associated with each of those alternatives, the amount of money that we then allocate across the electrification discount and the DI program ratchet down a little bit. So these are just some basic structural options. If we went the whole way, and if we thought about not putting any money towards 2A and 2B, the electrification discount and the DI program, our discount could be up to about 7% in round numbers. So looking at this, we like something that's balanced. We like alternative 3, which would be increasing our discount for everybody from 2% up to 4%, and then allocating a substantial amount of money, 9.5 million, to both funding an electrification discount and the expanded multifamily DI program. A point I'd make around the electrification discount is we want to put sufficient funding behind this so that we can offer the discount for a number of years into the future. So we're going to, if we do this, we're going to take money and we're going to put it in a fund that we will then spend out of to fund that discount in the coming years. We want it to be a little bit different than the way we do discounting today, which is, we establish a discount and then we change it every year. In this case, we'd like to be able to preserve that discount funding for electrification for some time horizon, which we've kind of arbitrarily set here at 5 years. So alternative 3 would have us at on the order of 32,000 customers after 5 years, being able to fund a ramp in a sense of customers that would first be coming onto the rate next year, and then more and more customers over time to 30,000+ 5 years out. And we could fund a 10% discount under that scenario, under alternative 3. And then the 9.5 million for the expanded DI program, that would support installation of heat pump technology in about 2,000 additional apartment units. So definitely a material impact there. So that's that's how this table works. Of course, we can contemplate, different alternatives or alternatives that may fall between these, but just wanted to lay that out as a starting point. So final slide. So in summary, we recommend again, this is at the board meeting in mid-December, that the board immediately approve adding the new electric home rate to SVCE's rate structure or rate schedule, and that we would mirror PG&E's rate with the currently applicable discount. And then we also recommend that the board adopt a hybrid approach for 2023 rate setting and discounts, increase the general overall discount to 4% from 2%, allocate $9.5 million to each of the electric home rate funding opportunity and to the multifamily direct install program. So that's it for the presentation. Questions?
All right, I see Director Elahi. Please go ahead.
Thank you. And Don, thank you for putting forward this hybrid approach. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. The 1%, 2% discounts, I don't know if the homeowner even feels it. And even that percentage discount, if you're going to agree on anything, I would suggest doing it as a lump sum discount spread over. So like, 2% per month would become 24%. And a 24% discount would be something that the homeowner would notice. So if you can do that, I would suggest you may want to think about that too. The other impact thing on the hybrid, let's do something that has a full impact. I mean, and if it's going to take that, if you can go back to that slide where you were putting forward the alternatives, yeah. So it's like the alternate one, it seems to have a bigger impact than the other alternates. And I would suggest if you're going to do something, let's do it where it does have a huge impact. There's a lot of construction that's going to be having. The housing element requires, for example, we're putting ADUs together, and some of them would be available for teachers and for affordable housing. And it would be great to have this amount of subsidy available for those ADU units where people are for affordable, which will help in affordable housing, so that we can have a bigger impact on those particular units. And so I would probably suggest that we consider an alternate that has as much of an impact at one time as possible. Because if you spread it out too thin, then it's like it's being spread out, and it's almost like that whole old fishing example that people give. If you give a person a fish, that you fed him for one day, but if you teach them how to fish, then you've taken care of them. And the same way, if you install more of these electric saving appliances, you've taken care of them rather than giving them some of the discounts. So keep the discounts at the lowest level. The 2% is fine, but increase the impact and maybe pick an alternate where we'll have more of an impact on more individuals from that perspective. Those would be my comments. And thank you so much for bringing up the hybrid concept, though. I think that's a great way to go.
Thank you, Director Elahi. Let's go with Director Gibbons.
Thank you. I really do appreciate all of the innovation that Silicon Valley Clean Energy staff and Dawn come up with over the time frame. It's spectacular, and this is another one which I wasn't expecting. Thank you. So I have a couple of questions. This discount is anticipated to go over a period of years. If you could go back to the other slide, please. Yes. What happens if the PCIA comes back in when we don't have this kind of money? I'm assuming that the 15, 12, whatever column C is, that money is available every year, or is that cumulative over 5 years?
It's cumulative over 5, but it's set aside now. So, so that it can fund, a growth of, customers up to, say for alternative 3, 30,000+ over that 5-year period. And over that 5-year period, those customers will get a 10% discount.
Okay, good. I think that would be helpful to clarify when you discuss the chart there. What applicable date would this be, knowing that PG&E often doesn't set their rates in December?
So Yeah, this whole thing could slide out 2 or 3 months if that happened, and you've certainly seen it happen in your tenure here. I think we probably have to go back 3 years when it actually happened in December as scheduled. Before that, it was pretty regularly in December, or at the end of December where we got their published rates.
Okay, and then this is a complicated question and it ties directly into what Director Elahi just brought up. And see if I'm understanding this correctly. The electrification column C. So I'm using column C and column D as the decision makers because I think column B is kind of the default with what we want to spend in column C and D. So I'm looking at the new building codes, which do require substantive electrification, even for ADUs, and all of that. So the difference would be what cities are doing in their own REACH codes to go all electric. Right?
Yes, though customers who have electrified are eligible for this rate if they want.
Yes, sorry, that's, yes. Okay, so that's where I was starting, and then I was reacting to what Director Elahi said. Yes, so this rate, column C, applies to anyone who goes all electric, be it a remodel or a new building.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of an asterisk on this. This won't be something that solar customers are eligible for right off the bat, although it's intended that happens over the next year or so. So if a new home is built and as per code, it has solar on it, they wouldn't be eligible right out of the chute for this, but they could be eligible or will be eligible down the line.
Okay, so that was my other second big question. But just to come back to this one. I'm thinking that this is motivation for anyone currently to go all electric. And then motivation for anyone who's building new to go to their local REACH code, or if they don't have a REACH code, to still go all electric. They would benefit by this column C.
Correct.
Okay, so then the second question is what you just were talking about. I thought initially that the special rate for all electric was applying to homes with solar and battery, but it's not. They're two separate programs and two separate savings potential.
I'm sorry, can you ask that question again? I think you said that correctly, but I
Okay, let me try and say it again.
Yeah.
I originally thought that the electrification rate, the discount rate for all electric buildings, was going to be related to the reductions from projects with solar, like the NEM 3.2.
Mm-hmm.
But they're actually two separate programs and two separate discounts.
So, yeah, the way that we've thought about this and the electrification rate that's been or is about to be rolled out by PG&E, interestingly enough, does not apply to solar customers yet. Although what Girish said right at the start when he was talking about NEM 3.0 does contemplate the use of, whether it'll be the same one or not, I don't know, but an electrification rate for solar customers that, again, makes the time of use increment much wider, or the difference between peak and off peak, again, to incentivize storage. So that could wind up being the same electrification rate, or it could be a solar electrification rate. I think a question for us would be, would we want this discount to apply to solar customers and regular customers? I suppose that could be something we contemplate, or maybe we'll know more about that even in the next few weeks as the
Right. So that, I would just put
tariff
that,
is ratified.
right. I would just put out there that it's important for everybody to understand that it's two different topics. So initially, it's easy to kind of mush them together.
Mhm.
And then the last question I think I have is 2B, column D, to, again, thinking of the new buildings as being substantively covered by the new electric code. Is this money really to convert existing multifamily?
Yes, and yeah, what's particularly targeted here is older multifamily. So think apartment buildings built in the 50s and 60s,
Okay,
of which we have a lot, and that's where this, as Peter mentioned, baseboard resistance heating is really typical. And the direct install, what that means is this program will have a contractor associated with it, a solution provider who is tied to the program, and will work directly with property owners to do these installations, funded by us, and the installations will be principally funded by us. It won't require a significant investment by the property owner. So hoping to make this as easy to do as possible. That's kind of how a direct install program works. And I don't know if Adam or Peter have any other comments on that, but because
so,
otherwise it's hard for these types of programs to
take off. I would
really
just
take
offer,
off. Yeah.
yeah, I would just offer, and this is a complexity that may be way too complex. I would think of any, targeted would be any BMR units, below market rate units, or any Section 8 housing, and tying it with anyone who will get this program if they convert to a Section 8 housing. There's a couple of things like that there may be synergistic opportunities there. That's just a wild out of the top of my head. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you, Director. Let's go to Director Martinez Beltran.
Thank you. Great recommendation, Director Gibbons. I like that last one that you discussed. I wanted to look at, so I guess my first question that I wanted to look at is, if there was another slide that talked about column C, and that there could be a 6% or a 3% below. Is there any way we could get to that slide? It might have been the slide right before that. No.
The bar chart.
Yeah.
That's it.
There you go. So I'm wondering if we, it looks like with the 12 million alternate one is with the 6% increase. Is that correct? If we were to go with the 12, I think it's 12.5 million for column C.
No. So
So let me
So
just, what I'm getting
ahead.
at, I'm wondering if, I just think that I would rather put the dollars in the multifamily homes and get people who are not really able to have that available to them, almost conditioned as that is a norm, and create a norm of that's what they look for. That's what they're going to demand when they go and look for new units. And renters move often. Sometimes you have to move depending on where you're at. If you've got somebody who maybe adult children move in, or maybe they sell the property or whatever it is. So I would love to see us put some more dollars into the multifamily. Maybe we stay at the 2%. And then if we could just make people where they're kind of hitting, it's a neutral, if they are greening up and they are able to do it and electrify their home, and they're able to do that, then let's just make it where it's not a cost to them. But I don't think we necessarily need to give a savings. I just don't see that's, I don't even think that that's something that we should be talking about. And then another option is, for example, in Morgan Hill, we're building a new fire station. And when we looked at it, we did make it, and we wanted it to be, of course, all electric. But budget wise, and after COVID, we're not able to do that. And so that was something that was put off, and we're going to do later, quote unquote, as funds come available. So there may be, that might be another area of thought that we want to look at, partnering with our cities to see for any public buildings that we know are going to get lots of use, that we could provide some type of assistance there. And so those are my thoughts. But going back to this again, just I'm trying to understand, was it the 9.5 that gets you to the $6 increase? Is the 12.5 million that gets you to $3 savings? Or could you explain that to me?
So this is a model of a single customer.
Oh,
You
I see.
start with kind of that mixed fuel and you electrify without a rate change. You would incur, the average home in our climate zone and all of those other assumptions is going to have an increase of $40. And then the PG&E rate is intended to reduce that down. That's the $6. And then because $6 is, it's still an increase. We were looking for parity. So that $3 is really a safe net zero on an average home. So some people will be below it, some will be above it, but on the average, that's what we were aiming for. So the number of customers that get to go through that is what is the final decision point, really.
So the 9.5 gets us to the $3 savings on average.
All of them can get us to the $3 savings, but the volume of customers that get there is what changes by budget level.
And how many customers, if we could go back to the other, the previous one now. So how many customers are impacted or estimated to be impacted with alternate one?
So the $15 million we expect at the end of a 5-year period, we've got kind of a reasonable ramp up in participation would be 50,000 customers.
Okay, so that's the number there.
Yeah.
Okay, and so if you go down to alternate 3, the recommended that's 9.5 million. So we were looking at a 10% discount to get us to that net amount. So you're saying that roughly everybody is going to balance out, looking at approximately 32,000 customers.
Yeah, and I think that's we've got that one starred, and really that's about the ramp to 30,000 customers. So this is to get to 50,000, there would be kind of an incremental marketing push, advertising. We'd have to get awareness up.
Sure. Okay.
That's
so then I guess I would say maybe we could do the 9.5 million, and that would leave us some flux of where we could put some additional dollars. If we did 9.5 million and we kept our discount at 2%, then we would have some additional dollars that we could either increase in the expanded multifamily or put elsewhere.
yes, we limited this to 4 alternatives, but there are possibilities within that.
Yeah, no, and I really appreciate that you've done everything for us, and we get to now play pawns with what we have in front of us, but I realize that getting here was a massive lift. So thank you for that. And that's all I'd have to offer. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Let's go to Vice Chair Flagger.
Thank you, Chair Tyson, and thanks again to the SVCE team for bringing this forward. Of course, it's great news and this is a good problem to have for us to figure out how to spend the $30 million. But I agree with Director Elahi. It's not a lot of money. Like when you really look at the different options, it's not a lot. And so my interest would be ensuring that the impact is seen and felt by customers. And so I'm concerned about spreading it over a 5-year period, what that really looks like to an individual customer. Something else I jotted down when I reviewed the packet was, I realized staff is proposing a 50-50 split between columns C and D. And I would hope that, especially because this is projected over a 5-year period, that we have flexibility in moving the monies between those columns, because as we've seen with other programs, we learn as we go. And so I get the proposal being 50-50, but to the extent we can build in some flexibility here, where, for example, if next year we realize there's more of a demand or a bigger and better impact would happen to the electrification, especially because we're all moving forward with REACH codes, and hopefully our residents and customers will move to electrification. Do we need to increase the funds there, the discount funds there? So just a thought in drafting this, if we could give ourselves some flexibility. I also noted where it says at the bottom that all scenarios include 10% additional bill credit for the CareFira customers, but that says planned in the FY23 budget. Don or Adam, can you explain, because these discounts are spread over 5 years, but then this note only says for the FY23 budget. So can you remind us if this 10% bill credit is also over a 5-year period, or will we need to revisit this annually just to make sure that our CareFira customers continue to have some advantage separate and apart from what we're doing here with this 30 million?
Yeah, so column 1, the general discount is revisited every year, and the CareFira discount is revisited every year. So yeah, those discount levels wouldn't be pre-funded, or that's just part of the rate setting that we do every year. The thought here is that we have this surplus, could be a one-time surplus, who knows, and could we apply that into a fund that would enable us to discount for electrification over the next 5 years for some number of customers.
Right. Well, because we're using the surplus, and we're saying all customers, we're not distinguishing between the CareFira. And I think you intentionally have that note at the bottom to remind us that we are taking separate action,
yes,
to support our CareFira customers. But it struck me that right now, and I can't imagine any future board not still continuing to offer some credit to our CareFira customers, but it struck me that the proposal to use the 30 million is over a 5-year period, but right now the only guarantee separate program for the CareFira that gives them this additional credit is just for FY23. So if in the presentation to the full board you want to note there as well that, and this is something we consider every year, so they know it will track every year. We're looking out for CareFira customers every year. This is not a one-time FY23 credit. When would this become effective? So I know it has to go to the full board. When would this be effective, Don?
It would be, assuming PG&E sticks with their timing.
Go back to Lizzie's question.
Yes, this would be effective January 15th of 2023.
Okay. And then I know someone brought up the idea of having this apply to solar customers. I'll just add my 2 cents. Again, I don't think this is a lot of money. And so my preference would be for it not to apply to our solar.
I think there's a very interesting and good argument there that we can think through and clarify by mid-December.
Okay. No, but this is so, and as to the options that we're considering, I defer to you as the experts and the team with alternative 3. My preference would be alternative 2, to be honest, where you do a little bump to 3% and then still have more funds for, and I think C is where we're going to see the demand for these funds, because the direct install program, I think, requires additional steps as well. So my preference would be, and I'm fine deferring to staff's recommendation doing alternative 3, but coming in, I would support, alternative 2 as well, just because I think it allows for more funds in column C. And thank you again.
Chair Tyson?
Yes, sir.
if I may just kind of summarize a little bit of the direction I'm kind of
May
hearing.
I make my comments first and then
Sorry,
you
yeah.
can summarize? Yes. So thank you for the discussion. I think it's been really thoughtful. We're approaching it from different angles. I was struck by the presentation talking about the electrification of old apartment buildings and the efficiency that would result from using heat pumps. I'm struck by that because I guess I've been in enough places. I once lived in an apartment like that. Then people also have their little electric heaters they carry around to different rooms. And I think the broader issue is these old buildings, they might be drafty and have poor window insulation. And that's the nature of the energy loss as well. And so I like this thought of making them more efficient. And I just hope that we approach it from an overall perspective, as opposed to replacing natural gas, we're just using less electricity. On the other hand, by adding air conditioning, maybe we're adding more electricity during those peak times. So I'm puzzling that as I'm sitting here. In terms of the direction to go here, I myself am leaning toward your suggestion of alternate 3. And the thought is, we're doing this, we're deciding this once, and we're setting aside this money for over 5 years. And when you look at the rate of heat pump adoption, I think it's very slow. I think we need exactly what Vice Chair Flagger said about flexibility to move money around. I think when it comes to percent discount, to give it to everybody and a little bit, you won't see it that much, but there's a sort of a sense of a little bit of a fairness, and then pulling chunks of this money across. And I like the sense of that. So I'm fine with alternative 3, and I like the idea of flexibility. And also, I think we just have to think through, what are the implementation aspects? How do we know over time? Let's say this is just our fund from this year. Next year, what do we expect to have? And can we reallocate whatever surplus in a different direction based on what we've learned over the next year? I think that's quite possible. So with that, then we can have Girish can summarize all that.
Sorry for interrupting before you had your say. So at least what I'm hearing is kind of alternative 3. And if there's a change, let's go to alternative 2. So that seems like, so it's 3 or 2, with I'm hearing quite a bit of a 3. And also flexibility in funding, leaving us some optionality and learning, right? This is the first time we're doing this. So I think we'll be very explicit about learning and coming back with changes. So we'll make that part and parcel of the program. And I think I think market prices. So we've been conservative about our reserves, which is the way I think we ought to be. But we'll get to know more in the next 3 to 6 months. So maybe as part of the learning, if there's more money in our reserves, we'll come back and expand the funding for the direct install program or even the electrification rate. I think this is all useful, but may say in terms of timing for decision making, there is one rate that we do need to have approval in December, and that's just mirroring PG&E's rate. So that's just you just need to do that. Everything else may be a little dependent on PG&E's timing, but I think I'm gonna go back to Dawn and Adam, see if we need additional input from a staff perspective before we bring it back to the board.
I definitely we need to spend a little more time on Director Flagor's NIM question.
Yeah.
And probably add a NIM slide to this, or really think through that aspect, especially if NIM 3.0 customers are by default going to be placed on this electrification rate. We just need to think about what that means for the numbers, what that means for, how we're spreading around our incentives.
Let me just say, I forgot to mention that I'm also in agreement with Vice Chair Fleiger's comments about the NEM folks. And then I'm a little remiss, I didn't notice we had a hand up from the public. So if we could have Brian speak, I'd like to hear from him.
Hi, thank you. I was waiting for you to open public comment. Can you hear me? I'm not sure if my microphone's working.
We hear you fine.
Thank you. Could you go back to the slide, please, that shows the rate with electrification and with natural gas? And I can't see it. Oh, there.
It's coming. I think about 1 or 2 slides before that. Even more.
Keep going, yeah.
Even more. There, that one.
I thought that was a very interesting slide. When we went through our reach codes in Monte Sereno, we had some people raising this as an issue. And 2 things. First of all, I have an all-electric house inside the house. Outside, I use some natural gas. And I don't know if I would qualify for the electric home rate. That's one. The second thing is I've got 3 electric vehicles plus an all-electric house. So I use a lot of electricity. And I've been receiving this very annoying letter from PG&E saying that I'm being taken off of my EV plan because I'm using too much electricity. And my rates are essentially going to go up because I have too many electric vehicles. And it seems kind of odd to me. But I guess my 2 comments are, as you look at this savings, think about how this is going to change with more people having electric vehicles and the rates that they're going to pay for those electric vehicles for the electricity. And then the second point is, if you're dealing with a multi-year program, 5 years, think about the next series of reach codes and what's going to happen as electrification increases. Thank you.
Thank you, Alternate Director Makachuk. You know, that slide that that you just showed, it reminded me of the thought. What it tells me is that natural gas prices are high and electricity costs are high, and for some reason they seem to be out of whack, because that electrification should only lead to a price increase given the ultimate energy reduction if natural gas prices haven't risen as much as those electricity prices. With that, we have Director Martinez Beltran again.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to bring one other point, which is, and I'll need to talk with the full board as well. Just in that, I've had an experience here in downtown Morgan Hill. We've got a Craftsman home in our core that upgraded everything to be an electric home, and they have not been able to plug in because PG&E has told them that the transistor needs to be updated, their transistor. So they had to pay to have that done. They had to get a permit, and it still has not been changed. Now they have had this, it was for their daughter, their adult daughter, to move into. They've had this home upgraded for about, I think, 8 months. They have not been able to rent it. They have not been able to live in it because there's no electricity. They shut off their electricity because the transistor is not able to support, they say, this upgrade. And I'm concerned about this because as we look to support the transition, and as you know, we've banned natural gas in Morgan Hill, it makes it very difficult. You know, this woman is very frustrated, as she should be. So I just wanted to bring that up as we're making strides and looking to try and help electrify our homes and our buildings, that I think we need to do some work on the side as well with PG&E, that we've got to get our infrastructure upgraded.
Thank you, Director. And do I understand? I think you're referring to a transformer that is outside the property and that is a PG&E.
That's right.
It's their issue, and they haven't
Everybody from the
upgraded for that demand. Okay.
Everyone from the street plugs into it.
Yeah.
And I guess they're not able to support the electrification of this Craftsman home because it's too much of a demand until that transformer's been updated.
I see. Yeah. Well, I have my own frustrations with PG&E right now, but anyway, I thank you for adding that comment. We'll make sure we're thinking about that in our terms of our complete implementation. And with that, I think let's say we have item 6 to get to, program snapshot, and we have 13 minutes. So let's proceed with that.
Great. Well, I think I am giving a very quick intro. Great discussion there. What we're pivoting to here is this program snapshot, which you all have seen some of these over the past few months. We've started doing them as a way to try to highlight recent programs that we have or are launching as a way to kind of give you a little bit more visibility into some of the key design decisions that went into them and how they're going. So today we have the Future Fit Homes program, which is related to the conversation we were just having, but is about the upfront construction costs for going all electric. And we have Jessamine Allen here to give the presentation today. She's led the design of the program and getting it launched and out the door. And we're here really to whet your appetite. I hope you are excited about this and want to learn more. You can go to our webpage, and you can also reach out to us with specific questions. But we've designed these snapshots to just take a couple of minutes and then have time for a few questions. Jessamine? I am not hearing Jessamine.
No.
Seeing her on the list anymore. Well, I guess
it's you.
Great news. I'll be giving the presentation today.
Yeah.
All right, next slide. So Future Fit Homes, this is an incentive program that builds on the heat pump water heater program, rebate program that we've had for a while, by expanding it to heat pump HVAC, panel upgrades, pre-wiring for future appliances, and removal of the gas meter. And so we've increased the rebates available, and we've increased the technology types that are eligible under the program. We're really trying to push towards whole home electrification by increasing the incentives and really trying to get people to think about the entire package of their home and the steps they're going to need to take to electrify everything, not just one appliance. We do have future phases in mind that will provide more kind of concierge support to help customers develop their electrification roadmap and walk them through it. Right now, the target audience really is residential. We've launched this program with just focusing on single family incentives. Next slide. So we've got about 2 million currently allocated for these rebates. As I said, there's other buckets of funding that we're going to be using for rebate administration, as well as these support services that really are going to amplify our reach and help us try to reach harder to reach folks. You can see the table here, the different rebate amounts from SVCE in the middle column, and then the typical cost on the right. And so heat pump water heater, heat pump HVAC, pre-wiring, all these different devices, really trying again to help people either make the full transition right now or do the pre-wiring while they're doing their heat pump water heater, so that when it comes time to replace their HVAC system, all of the circuits are in place and they can easily do that swap out.
Hi, Justin. Sorry.
Oh,
is it okay?
Hello, Jessamine. Yes, please take over.
Yes, I had some lovely technical difficulties, so I'll just jump in. So I think Justin was touching on the different incentives that we're making available through this program. I'll just start from the beginning of this slide. We currently have about 2 million allocated towards these incentives. For comparison, we've awarded approximately 900,000 through our heat pump water heater rebate program over the past 2.5 years or so. And so yes, this table shows the incentives we offer, also a comparison to the project costs. As mentioned, the heat pump HVAC, pre-wiring, and gas meter removal rebates are the new incentives that we are excited to offer. Next slide, please. So we went through a rigorous design review process to identify program goal, the program scope and goals. And then we've also had very substantial support from SMUD as we moved into implementation. Fundamentally, we want to make sure that this program is additive to existing resources and addresses actual customer needs while trying to ensure a positive experience, both with the process and of electrification and the technology itself. And so these goals listed on this slide, will continue to shape the program as we expand beyond our rebates. And just a few more details to note, past heat pump water heater rebate participants are eligible for the new incentives. And we are helping customers with active heat pump water heater reservations transition seamlessly to future fit homes if they want to, and they will be able to take advantage of the additional offerings. Also, we are continuing to offer care adders, which is an additional $1,000 for each measure. Next slide, please. And so we are very excited to announce that the application for rebates is open. The application is located on the website listed here, and we've already seen strong uptake with over 20 active reservations. So with these early participants, we will learn about their home electrification experience to improve our own rebate offerings, as well as to inform future phases and services of this program. And that's it from me.
Well, great, very interesting. I'll be curious to listen and see how the uptake is, especially as relating to our earlier discussion of other programs. Do we have any questions from our directors? I don't see any. Do we have any questions from the public? I don't see any hands raised. So thank you, Jessamine and Justin. And thank you, everybody. Thank you, staff, for giving us a very efficient, very informative meeting. And I hope that you got what you were looking for out of us as well in this process, because that's what we're looking for. Do we have any final committee or staff remarks? I don't see any hands raised.
Yep. 5:30, December 14th, for a reception for Cupertino City Hall.
That's right, be there. Okay, with that, thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time.